I like to believe people are getting healthier, or at least, working towards healthier habits. Some people can't afford a wearable, right? But there's other things you can do to, essentially manage your autonomic nervous system. So you can go into the river. I do cold plunging literally here in the rivers. If you don't have a river nearby, you can do a cold shower. You can do breath work as another example. So, these tools, while the diagnostics absolutely cost money, a lot of these things we try to make, accessible for the everyday person to do as well.
It seems, I've talked about this on quite a few podcasts lately, but like the people that are in the nutrition, performance space, biohacking space, like they're in hook, line, and sinker. Like they want to get all the wearables. They want to dive as deep into the research. They want to implement as much as they possibly can. Then you've got the other subset of the population that seems to be totally oblivious to these tools and resources and just continues to get unhealthier and unhealthier. So like the bell curve has gotten more narrow. I mean, you've got just two polar extremes more so than a blended median. What is the catalyst to get people on the right track in the first place? Do you think it's going to be like this implosion point at which society just simply can't sustain itself as they get unhealthier, or what's going to happen?
I think it will be a combination. And I think we're seeing this right now. The fact that Andrew Huberman can do a 3-hour podcast with his retention rate, and the fact that people are listening to 3-hour science-based podcasts is amazing. And I think as the technology gets more ubiquitous, Kennedy just announced that every American should have a wearable, as a side note. I mean, that's pretty progressive, whether you like his policies or not. I mean, that's one that's interesting. And it really lends itself to, the ability for the technology just to get easier for people to use. So accessibility is part of that. And then 2 is, how do you drive action from the thing? I think that's what a lot of these wearables don't do as well. And it's a gap that we're filling. Is it's one thing to say, okay, your HRV is elevated, what have you been doing? But then offering really practical mechanisms to try to reduce, your HRV and improve your ability to rest. What does that look like for parasympathetic regulation, basically? So I believe that we're seeing that trend, shift more and more. I mean, I think we're seeing it in real time. And I remember 10 years ago, I was doing a triathlon in Central Coast, California. And one of my buddies, we were like camping outdoors, doing a training camp, and he had a red light on his knee. And we're like, Dean, what are you doing over there? And he's like, oh, you got to try this red light thing. This was like over 10 years ago, right? And at the time, no one had heard of red light. It's now on Tony Robbins' homepage, and of course, I'm sure the majority of your readers have all done red light at this stage. So, these things that used to be more fringe are now becoming, more and more ubiquitous. I mean, literally, you're seeing that with, these types of facilities with cryo, as an example, cold plunging, at home cold plunging, that whole market has just exploded. So I believe we're seeing a shift. And then, again, back to the, USDA side of the house. In general, I like to believe people are getting healthier, or at least, working towards healthier habits. But that's where we're really trying to also focus not just on the peak performance. It's like the everyday user, that can really benefit from that concept. Again, we grew up with very little information outside of the food pyramid on nutrition, and obviously that was completely flawed. And this more than anyone as someone as a keto evangelist. So that's my optimism, ultimately. At the end of the day, it's just trying to meet, that normal human and also provide accessibility. I would say that's another big one too. Our programs range in cost. Some people can't afford a wearable, right? They can't afford to do a program, but there's other things you can do to essentially manage your autonomic nervous system. So you can go into the river, here in Colorado. I do cold plunging literally here in the rivers, 45 degrees. It's freaking freezing. But we do it regularly. And so if you don't have a river nearby, you can do a cold shower. You can do breath work as another example. So, these tools, while the diagnostics absolutely cost money, a lot of these things we try to make, accessible for the everyday person to do as well.
It is interesting, man. I'm reading a book. I just read Cam Haynes's Undeniable is his latest one. And then I read, I'm reading The Comfort Crisis right now. And it's interesting talking to people in the biohacking health space. It's like so many of these fundamental recommendations are things that were just by definition happening on a day-to-day basis 500 years ago. We took it for granted. And the world has gotten so much more soft, plush, and comfortable that we have to seek out this adversity. going to get a cold shower in the river. Like that just happened everyday
Right.
basis. Like going, putting forth a bunch of activity, putting a bunch of steps in, hunting down food, like
Right.
cooking a meal with your family, like all these things that were just, part of the day back then are now things that we've got to like call a biohack and get excited about to implement. But it's like, man, it makes such a profound difference. Like obviously eating processed hyper palatable junk food and watching Netflix all day is not the cure.
100%. Isolation, I mean, that's absolutely a killer. We have also found the power of connection as an example. People who are connected to themselves, to their family, to their higher power, whatever it is, if you have that sense of connection and purpose, your life expectancy increases like, what is it, 10 to 12 years or so. So, the power of connection, just having community and people around you as an example. It's, yeah, very, very powerful.
Is there a community functionality within Brain One?
Not yet. We're working on it right now. I intentionally wanted to wait a bit. We started testing with some basic gamification. So, really in some ways competing against yourself, but using things like streaks were built in day one. Did you do the things you said you were going to do on a micro habit basis, on a protocol basis? And now we're building leaderboards, and then the ability to like follow and share and, all those types of things. But very excited about it. And yeah, the sort of the community members as well.
Nice. As far as all the popular biohacks are concerned, the ones that you've played around with and implemented in your own day-to-day routine, what are the ones that you feel personally have the biggest bang for the buck and ones that are probably just smoke and mirrors and not really necessary?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think fundamentally just starting with like the non-negotiable and the basics. So as a data scientist myself, measurement, I wouldn't even call this a biohack per se, but it's the door to understanding your baselines that you can then optimize, right? So minimal, as we discussed, like Oura is a great example. What, $300, for the ring, $6 a month. And then you have that baseline of your activity plus your sleep data that you can then begin to optimize against. So I think, that would be one I would say out of the gate that can allow you to understand, your data that you can then ultimately optimize against. I think other big ones, I'm a big fan of BPC, as a peptide for inflammation. When I'm here in Colorado and I'm skiing all winter, snowboarding nearly every single day I possibly can, you feel in the joints. And so I definitely feel with something like BPC as a peptide, the inflammation and the recovery absolutely just shortens. You just have to give yourself injections, which, is not always the easiest for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But, what other, I mean, again, it's as I go down the list, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress. I mean, literally for every one of these, circadian regulation, direct sun in the morning for 20 minutes. I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than that. So things like that, plus hydration, plus high protein, those are kind of, again, the non-negotiables. And then they get more advanced from there, depending if I'm training or if I'm traveling or, whatever the routine might be.
Are there any that have like really gained popularity and momentum, but you're like, man, this is not worth near the hype that it's been given?
Not that I would say offhand, not necessarily worth the hype. I think some other ones I would maybe give more credence to are, again, things like PEMF or electrical magnetic, frequency treatment in general. I mean, we're starting to see a lot of, really cool research continue to come out about that, and TMS and, those types of modalities, essentially. So those are pretty exciting, I would say.
Yeah, I've not done that. I'm familiar with it. But like the electromagnetic pulsing for muscle stimulation, relaxation. Like when my wife was in labor, they had like this electrical thing that they offered her where they could just hook that up to her and it would, I guess distract the intensity of the contractions. But it's like, who would have ever thought about that? Well, that makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another partner. They're doing binaural beats that they actually use in surgeries to essentially get to a specific, gamma brain frequency. Mm-hmm. And they can do surgeries without anesthesia. I mean, we've been hearing some pretty crazy things along those lines. But
the binaural beats is trippy, man. I had a guy on the podcast a while back, and he was like, "You can totally like I used to have really bad OCD, and he's like, you can totally rewire your brain. Basically, gets stuck in a feedback loop, and you've got to like be repetitive to like fulfill that loop. But if you retrain the brain via this binaural feedback, it's like, man, that is totally counter to the drug-induced formula that's typically prescribed."
Yeah, 100%. I try to keep all pharmaceuticals to an absolute minimum, only when necessary. And again, there's a number of these modalities that are out there that can be just as effective. So yeah,
Totally.
those are great examples.
So what's the timeline with Brain One? Like what stage are you at now? Is it live and open to the public, or what's the next
Yeah.
milestone there?
Yeah, so we still have it gated. We're allowing people in just on a cohort basis. Our major focus has been working with practitioners, longevity clinics, more progressive functional doctors that are looking for, again, these types of protocols to give to their clients. So that's really where we've been focused. That's been the core revenue model. And then the goal is to open this up and, give away the core protocols to humans. And then, we make money off of subscription and essentially selling the programs themselves.
Very cool. And what's the tentative timeline for when that'll be opened up?
Yeah, so we're testing right now. I think open to the public roughly 3 months is what we're thinking. We've been in beta now about a year, and we're just rigorously testing and making sure we can build the best product that we possibly can. But we're working with a number of clinicians from really across the United States at this stage, and we're live in a number of markets.